Catherine, go.
All right, go for it.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the session of 30 years of global, local action and collaboration. We're very excited that all of you can be with us here for this special presentation related to the UN. I would like, first of all, to introduce the president of Women's Intercultural Network, Alahe Amani, who is a very distinguished women's rights activist, as well as an international peace mediator with over 30 years of work with the University of California system. And she will say welcome to everyone.
Thank you very much, Catherine. It's an honor to be here with all of you as we celebrate 30 years of global local action through the Women's Intercultural Network. Today, we recognize the incredible impact of women and girls across cultures, communities, and generations, united in a shared vision of equity, leadership, and justice. Over the past 3 decades, WIN has built bridges across borders, empowered voices that demand change, and create spaces where women can lead and thrive. This work has never been more important, and it is because of each and every one of you, including the WIN family. Your passion, your dedication, and your commitment that we continue to As we gathered in this virtual space, let's celebrate our achievements, reflect on our journey, and commit to the future. Together, we are unstoppable. Thank you for being here and being part of this movement. And here is to the next 30 years of impact. Thank you.
Next, I would like to introduce someone who is very special to us all, Charlie Toledo, who is the head of the Susquehanna Intertribal Council in California, and she's going to lead us with a prayer to start off the event today. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, Catherine. It's an honor to be here with everyone. I've been working with this team of women for over 30 years, since 1986, but on behalf of the indigenous people of the world, the earth-based people. We've been here for 30,000 years before the Industrial Revolution occurred, and behind me in this picture is a ceremony that we were able to do on behalf of all sentient life on this earth. It was passed down through the oral tradition, the spoken word, and it needs to be done every 5,000 years, and we were given that responsibility to do that this 5,000-year cycle in December 21st, 2012. So on behalf of the earth-based people who've been here in balance with the earth, one water, one fire, one people, one air, that we are all connected. And this connection on this earth through the sun carries us into connection with the universe, the cosmic mother, Itieta Tarumara, the grandmother of all things. She has many names, holds us like the ocean holds all the creation, all the whale people and the dolphin people. The Tarumara holds us in her body as we are traveling through this cosmic sea. And for us to remember that we're just a little speck of dust in this incredible breathing, living, cosmic creation. And for us to be conscious and clear that we are infinite beings of light expressing ourselves through these physical bodies, through this physical earth, remembering always the connection and the love, the energy that connects us all. Ho, ho.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Next, I would like to introduce Kaden Choi, who is a national and internationally recognized photographer. And she has an initiative called Educata, where she partners with renowned journalists to host workshops and lectures, reaching thousands of students and introducing them to underreported stories in the world of journalism. You can read more about her in each of our presenters on our flyer in their bios. I'm going to keep it short for each one as we have a lot to cover today. Please, Kaden.
Thank you, Ms. Catherine, for that wonderful introduction. Hi, everybody. My name is Kaden Choi. I am a teenager from Southern California. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. You are all such incredible women. I'm so excited to be learning from you and just really reflecting on 30 years since the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. It's crazy to think about 30 years ago. I wasn't even alive, but I'm just so excited to be learning from all of you incredibly knowledgeable women. I really love the title of this meeting, 30 Years of Global Local Change. And I just think it's so important to me because I personally am very involved with the United Nations Association of Orange County, and our kind of mission and our motto is think globally but act locally. And I think that this title is very on trend and on point. So that's wonderful. But thank you, Ms. Catherine, again for that introduction. Just to rehash what she said, I am really passionate about journalism and photography. And, my goal and dream one day is to become a photojournalist. And I've really been kind of studying and observing how young people and also just people of all ages, how we consume media. I think in this day and age, it's so difficult sometimes to really differentiate real news versus fake news. And so I've created an initiative to bring in amazing journalists from around the world into classrooms. I work mostly with rural school districts, both in person and virtual programming through lesson plans, writing workshops, and also journalist visits. And my initiative really started as a grassroots effort in my backyard and in Southern California, but I've been fortunate enough to really expand the program to Central and Northern California. And now we exist in multiple states, including South Carolina, which I had my latest visit in with a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. So that's just a little bit about me and what I do in some of my initiatives. But I really want to talk about, my week at CSW 69. It was absolutely incredible. I just learned so much about, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and just how much progress we've already made. But I learned so much about what needs to be done. And we still have so many steps we need to take in order for, our work to be finished and to be considered finished. And a really meaningful panel that I was able to sit in on was of the Nordic Council. It was really amazing. I had no idea how much work and how much progressive work that they've been doing in terms of women's rights. Someone from the Nordic Council was speaking about, their education systems and how they've been enhancing that for women and young girls, and even like things like parental leave and affordable childcare too. And I also learned a lot about Sweden and their efforts to really take that next step and introducing a lot of those rights and a lot of those women's rights into their actual constitution. So in all, I just learned that the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action isn't just a declaration of the past that I once thought it was. It's actually a promise for the future. It's a promise for my generation to really keep continuing to carry the torch. A representative from UN Women said, we need to work on that promise. And, how do we work on that promise? We work on that by all of you women here today. You're inspiring me, the people at my mentors at the United Nations Association, and of course, Women's Intercultural Network are always inspiring me to just keep going and to keep carrying that torch. And I'm just so thankful that you all are, giving me and young people like me and Neha a seat at the table to really just continue the fight. And so thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Kaden. Next, as I've already introduced her, but our wonderful president, Alahe Amane, who has spoken all over the world about women's rights and who we are so fortunate to have as the president of WIN. Unmute.
Again. Thank you very much, Catherine. I just want to share a few words before sharing my presentation that I was planning to go to the 3rd International World Conference in Nairobi and made all the plans, but couldn't go to Nairobi for some personal challenges with the health of one of my children. And then, so I waited 10 years to go to Beijing. And as at the time I was at California State University, Long Beach, and I was asking around who is going to Beijing. And one of the faculty mentioned a group of women of color from Bay Area are going to Beijing, and they have kind of a delegation, they're organizing it. And so I contacted them, flew to San Francisco, and went along with maybe Julian knows exactly what, but maybe 60, 70 other women in a plane to Shanghai and from there to Beijing. So that's my story connecting with Women's Intercultural Network, that today I'm honored to be president of Women's Intercultural Network, and that journey developed during the last 30 years, and basically due to Marilyn Fowler staying in touch and engaging me, because I was in Los Angeles and Women's Intercultural Network headquarters and the core group were in San Francisco. So in September of 1995, when I went to Beijing, China, there were more than 42,000 women and 1,200 men, as it was documented, joined together in Beijing, in Wairu, China, because that was the NGO from, and the official conference for government representative was in Beijing, but we were in Wairu, China, for the fourth World Conference on Women. And it was a really heated debate during the official conference, and more than 400 events every day, including protests, exhibition, workshop in the NGO forum that we were attending. It was a powerful and progressive statement. The outcome document was a powerful statement about the empowerment of women and the imperative to advance our status globally. It asks us to bring the platform back to our grassroots wherever we are living in the world, and we have done that in California. So the Women's Intercultural Network is a non-governmental organization, is an NGO dedicated to connecting and empowering women across cultures to promote peace, equality, and justice worldwide. Founded in 1994, actually a year before Beijing Women Conference, by Marilyn Fowler and Eileen Hernandez, rest in peace, that I had always lots of respect for both of them. Of course, Eileen passed away, but Marilyn Fowler is in Los Angeles. WIN facilitates dialogues, partnership, and programs that address issues such as women's rights, leadership development, and social justice. Particularly, I want to emphasize that WIN culture always promote having young leaders at the table. And as you see, you heard Kaden, and you're going to hear Neha at the also today. That's something that we believed in it since Beijing Women Conference. By fostering intercultural understanding and collaboration, WIN aims to amplify women's voices and create sustainable change. I want to emphasize sustainable change in communities globally. Since 1995, the Women's Intercultural Network employed a calling the circle and a strategy to connect women and girls across diverse cultures globally and within US communities. This approach serves as the initial step in WIN's international strategy to link women's organizations worldwide for collective action on shared concern. And those shared concern, I'm sure Julian gonna explain more, is the 12 areas of concern that women globally sharing those challenges. The first circle was with women in Japan, then Uganda, Afghanistan, and then Iranian women in California. I want to emphasize that the concept of using the language of circle is because there is no power dynamic in circle. You know, we sit around, there is no hierarchy. It's not a chapter that the central office shared strategy. It's a very a feminist perspective in power sharing when we call it circle. So so the circles, one of the notable, very active circles currently is Iranian Circle for Women's Intercultural International Networking, ICWIN, which acknowledge that while women globally share common struggle, they also face unique challenges within their specific socio-political context. ICWIN aims to coordinate programs and community building activities that inspire advocacy, education, and unite against all forms of violence. In essence, WIN circles are collaborative networks that brings together women from various backgrounds to address mutual concern, promote advocacy, and work toward positive change in their community. So the circles was one of the outcome of 30 years of struggle bringing global local. The other project that was really one of a kind in its way to connect people and collaborate with other women's organization is KAVA. I recall that on June 28 to 30th, 1996, a year after Beijing conference, 400 women representing 175 major women associations in California met at San Francisco State University to draft CABA, the California Women Agenda, and our own platform for action for California. I have to mention that the grassroots organizing that created CABA, California Women Agenda, in response to the Beijing conference has become an active web of over 200 organizations, 10 regional coordinators, and thousands of girls and women, all mobilized not only to educate about the 12 critical concerns of the international platform for action, but also to develop and support programs which elevate the status of women worldwide. I have to mention that in Southern California, for many months, I was going to the downtown Los Angeles, adults from immigrants from other countries who were learning English as a second language and talking and explaining what was Beijing, what that means to women and girls in their community. So that was one of the really productive activity, community activity that I have ever done. I get so much out of it, talking to these immigrants, mainly from Latin America, that they were not speaking English, and I used translator to talk to them. The California Women Agenda was the platform of a Women's Intercultural Network, and through the 9 months, many have drafted, critics, and edited a document that I have it here, and I'm going to show it later. It's not handy next to me. So WIN also assumed the responsibility of CABA and financed it, organized it, put lots of effort, which I know that Julian and Charlie are going to talk about it more. Another project that within the last 30 years, other than circles and CABA, was that SIDA initiative. Cities for SIDA campaign has been instrumental in mobilizing cities to pass ordinance and policies based on SIDA. SIDA is for Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that United States is the only industrial country that has not ratified it. So our efforts is to ensuring that local governments prioritize women's rights, gender equity, and social justice. been also during the last 30 years engaged in grassroots mobilization, connect diverse women's voices across culture, advocates for politics that address economic empowerment, violence prevention, health, education, and leadership opportunity, and all under the umbrella of women's human rights and CEDAW, which is called the Bill of Rights for Women. So I'm gonna, through these efforts, WIN continues to build bridges with our global commitment, with local action, reinforcing the belief that women's rights are human rights. And that change starts at the community level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elahe. Next, I have the privilege of introducing Julianne Cartwright-Traylor, who is a Associate Director of International LLM Visiting Scholar and Student Exchange Program at the University of San Francisco School of Law. Her academic career has focused on international human rights and women and development issues. Julianne was in Beijing, and she's also led many different delegations at the United Nations at conferences from New York City to South Africa. Her work has, she's been on many, many different boards and a very respected legal scholar to do with with a focus on human rights. Please, we'd be happy to hear from you, Julianne.
I always forget to unmute myself. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Catherine. It's a privilege and an honor to be here today and to be here with my WIN colleagues and other members of our circles and what have you. I'm here out in San Francisco, California, but happy to join virtually. What I'd like to do is to talk about my experiences at, pre-Beijing, in Beijing, and when we returned from Beijing, what we did. And so to break it up that way, and Elahe has already told you about for me, pre-Beijing, those of us who were in San Francisco got together. And I remember having a meeting at the Chinese consulate because we wanted answers to questions about that. And that was the first time that I met a number of people in WIN. And then we went to Beijing, and Elahe, I don't know if we were on the same plane, but we went to Beijing. So I was fortunate to be both an NGO delegate to the official governmental meeting, as well as an NGO delegate to the NGO forum. So that gave me the two different perspectives on what was happening in Beijing. And in between the meetings, Wairau was an hour away from Beijing. And so we used to go to the governmental meeting in the morning, jump in a taxi over lunch hour, and then go out to Wairau to participate in the meetings there. There were 6,000 government delegations, 3,000 NGOs were represented at the governmental meeting. There were civil servants. There were 4,000 media representatives and 40,000 participants in the forum. And we all remember Hillary Clinton saying, women's rights are human rights are women's rights. And that was the cry for us at the meeting. We also remember Madeleine Albright, Eileen Hernandez, and the others. So the thing is, the Declaration and Platform for Action, they're the most comprehensive visionary plan ever created to achieve the equal rights of all women and girls. And it was an advisory statement at the time, and people were saying it wasn't legally binding, but it built on all of the work of the three previous UN meetings on women and the World Conference on Human Rights. But as I always say, it set forth government commitments that they should return to their home countries to implement. So that's one thing how we look at that. Let me say a bit about the platform for action. It said human rights and fundamental freedoms are the birthright of all human beings. Their protection and promotion is the first responsibility of governments. And what they say is the universal nature of these rights is beyond question. So think about this in those documents and how at this point revolutionary it sounds, but we have to remind ourselves about this. What it says, governments must not only refrain from violating human rights of all women, but must work actively to promote and protect these rights. So you have those two things for us to think about, and this was what was said 30 years ago in these documents, and that we have to remind ourselves about them. In each of the, what I should do is to tell you about the 12 critical areas in the platform for action. It's the platform for action. So, and under each of them, let me tell you: economic justice, education, environment, health, human rights, institutional mechanisms, media, peace, poverty, power sharing, the girl child, and violence. We have to think about everything that each of us is doing, that we've been doing with WIN, that we've been doing with the circles, and that people will be reflecting on. But those are the critical areas of concern as in the document. And what I must say in that discussion, and this was, the meeting ended like around 4:50 a.m. the last day of the conference. We were still in the room. We had been negotiating that whole time. And what it was, and it was passed at 5 o'clock. It was adopted unanimously, 189 countries. But here's the language. It talks about priority to promoting human rights, but it says without distinction of any kind as to race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinions, national or social origins, property, birth, or, and what the last category was the bone of contention. Some wanted to include sexual orientation. That was a big discussion, but there were some of the delegation, I won't mention all of the names, did not want that. And so in order to get the declaration and platform for action adopted unanimously, they use the word other status. Other status. That was the final point that allowed us, the government, to finally adopt the declaration and platform for action. But anyway, during this whole time, we talked about power and lying. You already mentioned the origins of power, and we always say it's a network that organizes, not an organization that is networking. And you can see all of the organizations that we work with. Power organized using the platform for action around those 12 critical areas of concern. For each one of them, we form a task force. And the task force worked with groups locally, regionally, and on the state. And we were the first state to organize along these lines. And I was privileged and fortunate to chair the task force on human rights. And what we considered during all of our discussions was that the entire conference, and this is what the NGOs did at Beijing, and what we reinforced when we came back to California, we said the entire conference was a conference about the human rights of women. whether we were addressing any of these 12 critical areas of concern, they all form the context. Human rights did that and stuff. And so that's the way that we work. And you can get copies of our reports. Elahi was talking about the reports that we did, and we can give you the information. We did periodic reports after the first one that we had at San Francisco State. And we talked about progress, but we talked about the challenges that we had. So I'm going to stop there, and there'll probably be other things that we can comment on. But we know that we still have the challenges in terms of the climate crisis, armed conflict, humanitarian crises, economic uncertainty, turbulent geopolitical climate, and crisis affected countries and stuff. But we are here as NGOs. We're mobilizing governments at all levels. The United Nations, you all are at the CSW these 2 weeks. Feminist and women's organizations, other civil society organizations, youth movements. We've got everybody represented here. The private sector and philanthropy. So I'm going to stop there, and just so happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Julianne. Our next speaker is one of my dear friends and great mentor of over 40 years, who helped me actually get involved more in human rights work and also in women's rights work. This is, I'd like to introduce Charlie Toledo, who is a Tao descendant native to New Mexico. Charlie is the executive director of the Susquehanna Intertribal Council in Napa, California. She was also present in Beijing. She has gone to a number of different United Nations events and is an international speaker, both on the, well, actually not only international, local, national, international speaker on many different topics, including the rights of Indigenous peoples. One of her big focuses is on Indigenous water, forests, and soil remediation, and developing solutions for problems of environmental and regional sustainability. Please, we'd love to hear from you, Charlie.
Thank you, Catherine. It's an honor to be here. And everything you just said, I was going to say, but I have been involved with international conception since Beijing. I also planned to go to Nairobi, but wasn't able to pull it off. It was still more difficult to travel back then, but I was able to be part of a delegation out of the San Francisco Bay Area in California, traveling to Beijing. We prepared for a year before we went, and then we had an incredibly dynamic presence there. There was all these workshops set up, in Wairo for the NGO convenings from 30,000 women from around the world, which was just such a magical and wonderful experience that we were able to immerse ourselves in. But there was nothing set up for the Indigenous people of the world. So being how we are, outlawed, somebody co-opted a tent, and we set up our own convening space in Wairo, kind of at the fringes of the city, but we still were able to meet. There was incredibly global Nobel Prize winner Indigenous people participating with us. We put together a petition that was submitted to the UN in 1995. The Indigenous people of the world have been trying to get represented at the United Nations since it started in 1939 as the League of Nations. The Mohawk, the Iroquois, the East Coast tribes were trying to be represented and were always denied. But finally, in 1995, 1,000 Indigenous people representing every continent on this earth were there. A petition was written up. We all signed it. I was honored to be a signator on that petition for Susquehanna Intertribal Council. It was submitted and accepted. So by the year 2000, for the first time in the history of the United Nations, Indigenous people had a platform. We were set up with 2 committees. They're permanent committees, but they don't have a vote on the floor, which is something that still Indigenous people are wanting to have. But having the 2 committees, that gives a full-time venue to file complaints. One is specifically for women. It was determined that women's issues are somewhat separate from men. So there's two, one specific to women, and then that gives us, the indigenous people of the world, a platform to organize globally and to affect governments, to file complaints about the way the governments have been persecuting and, have this predation. The Industrial Revolution created the earth as kind of kind of raping the mother. It's a predator mentality. And that's the main difference between indigenous people and all the other venues or perspectives, is that we see the earth as a living being and something to be grateful for and to treat it with respect, not as a economy base, not as something to be a predator on. So I still have been committed really since my early childhood to that perspective. And because of my early childhood upbringing, I always had a global perspective, always praying for peace. It was an honor to be there in Wairo and coming back. Linda Berman, who had organized the delegation, there were 60 of us that went out of the San Francisco Bay Area, and she gave us the umbrella for all of us because you have to be affiliated, like we still do, with an organization that has consultative status with the UN, which WIN does. And so we were all able to go. A lot of what we call lay people. We weren't politically situated so much, but we were there, and it was an incredible opportunity. When we came back, Linda Berman brought us together. She asked me at that time to do a blessing because she said the people that, went came back disoriented and depressed. And so I just said, we stepped into the future, and the future was beautiful. It was just an incredible experience. There was so much excitement. I think a lot of us that were there for the 9 days, that we didn't really sleep. I think we were just awake for 9 days and 9 nights. And so that was part of the depression, was just having to catch up on our sleep. But it was wonderful to convene. And I just said, we stepped into the future. We need to step back into the present, and really from the present. And the thing I love the most about working with the UN and working with people that have international perspectives is that you stay focused on solutions. You identify the problem in one sentence, then the rest of the conversation is based on solutions. And that's how I've always lived my entire life. So what happened was, then that's where CAWA came out of, that it turns out that first movement, all the people that organized California at the state level for human rights were at that blessing ceremony, that convening that Linda Berman had, or debriefing, I think is what they called it, that we had a day or 2 days in Oakland debriefing our experiences. I was able then a year later to be ambushed by Marilyn Fowler at UC Stanford. And I think it was her presence, her and I would get into incredible fights sometimes. They're always in private. But she was just like a pit bull, she'd get on your face and she wouldn't let go. Because I remember thinking, who is this? Someone just get back off of me. And then we of course stayed working together to this minute. And I served off and on as chair of WIN, and also was the formative stages of CAWA with Eileen Hernandez and Elahe and Juliana, Marilyn. We all worked together for quite a few years to create a platform that really is still working. It was a really good concept, and it's going global. We were able, and I'm still hoping that Cities for CEDAW can be translated into Spanish, because as I stepped down to off the chair's position of WIN, which I was on, like I said, for more than 10 years, and I had the good opportunity to travel with Marilyn and Eileen. We traveled to Uganda, met Annette and all of her beautiful people, still have deep connections there, and we traveled to Afghanistan 2 weeks after the United States military invaded there. And we met with women on the ground all over the state, all over the country, to bring hope and joy. Elahi was on that journey. She was a great translator for us. But we were traveling with people from those countries in the delegation. I traveled, had the opportunity to go to Korea to get in Seoul, had an international award for a lifetime devoted to world peace. And again, the World Peace Federation is another organization that really works locally but thinks globally, and they still are in strong standing around the world, working to create peace in all of the conflicts that exist on the earth at this time. They've been doing that for, I think, about 50 years. So I was, had experience with them. I did go with some of the convenings that happened in the Bay Area, meeting with them here and in New York City. I traveled to Ecuador and I've traveled a lot into Mexico. I'm hoping that we get Cities for CEDAW translated into Spanish. That's something I think we had a copy, but we're still trying to track it down. So I hope we get it because I've been working with people there. We talk about reweaving Turtle Island. My focus as I stepped off wind because I was getting so busy with what I'm doing here in California, but also just in the western part of North America, reweaving North America, reweaving the body, the Turtle Island, we call it, because when the Europeans invaded here in 1492, those two parallel lines from sea to shining sea cut out the belly, the gut of the turtle. So I've been committed since actually about 1978 to reweaving Turtle Island and working with Rigoberta Menchú, who I met for the first time in Wairo. And she was part of the indigenous gatherings and the conceptualization. She received a Nobel Prize. I think she's one of the youngest people to get that prize. When she was 14 years old in Guatemala, the US government had started a war down there. And her family was protesting because the students that were protesting the US takeover of that region were being persecuted. And they were on the Capitol steps, and her entire family, her parents, her aunts, her uncles, the older people in her group, they were fired. They torched them. They burned them alive on the steps. So the children that was Rigoberta Menchú was one of those. That was her parents, her aunts and uncles. They literally ran barefooted. They just ran from that incident. They did not stop running until they got to the southern border of Mexico. And they were given sanctuary in Mexico, which saved their lives. She has dedicated her life to peacemaking, and she wants to be an advocate promoting Cities for CEDAW in the Western Hemisphere through North and South America. So that's where I'm seeing her as one of our ambassadors to do that. There are people still that, unfortunately, our military industrial complex is one of the problems that needs to be addressed and dismantled. And we believe as Indigenous people of the earth, like I said in my blessing, that we are here, for such a brief time. We're infinite beings of light expressing ourselves through our physical body. And if we can find a way, which is our biggest struggle, is to get along with each other, that we can have differences of opinion, we can disagree on how to proceed. Once I was talking with Marilyn on the phone. I can't remember what it was about, but it was always something intense. And I was in my office. My daughter was my office assistant at the time. And we were just screaming. And she's like, "Mom, who are you talking to?" She was trying to interrupt. But then I talked for another hour. So I got off the phone and she goes, "Who were you talking to?" I said, "Marilyn." And she goes, "Oh, okay." Because we were screaming at each other, not cussing, just screaming. And then we were laughing and laughing. And then she said, "You were yelling, then you were laughing. Who was that?" But it's okay to be that way as long as we're polite when we disagree. We get very passionate about what we think is the solution. And if we can't have those robust discussions, we're weakening ourselves. We have to have them. So on that note, I'm going to hand over the mic. I'm just grateful to be with everybody here and stay robust.
Thank you very much, Charlie. The next person I'm going to introduce, we're actually going to see them via video. This is Latifa Amade, who's also on the WIN board. She was born in Afghanistan and has spent her life basically empowering women and fighting for women's rights. One of which led her to receive lots of threats in Afghanistan, and she and her family had to relocate to Europe to be safe. So this is from our dear colleague, Latifa.
Dear friends, colleagues, and companions, with greetings and respects to you all, I am truly honored to stand with you today to acknowledge the 3 decades of tireless struggle and effort by Women's Intercultural Network. 30 years have passed since this network was founded with the aim of building a bridge between women's movement around the world. A bridge that has connected voices of the women around the borders, cultures, and languages, and providing a platform for resistance, solidarity, and activism. Over the years, WIN has been pioneering force in fight for justice, equality, and challenging oppressive system, and empowering women's movement around diverse community, from New York and San Francisco to Kabul, Tehran, and beyond. The voice of this network has echoed the struggle of women standing for justice, equality, in a free world. I want to acknowledge particular women for their solidarity for Afghanistan's women who are experiencing one of the darkest periods in their lives. Afghan women have been stripped of fundamental rights, rights to education, rights to work, rights to participate in public. Despite of all these brutal restrictions, they continue to resist with an extraordinary courage. The voice of Afghan women from the streets of Kabul to exile around global, sending us a clear message: don't forget us. That's why I urge the leadership of WIN and all international organizations who are committed to women's rights to keep defending the women's right of Afghan women as a priority. The world may gradually turn indifference to Afghanistan's crisis, but we, as advocates of equality and justice, must not allow this silence to overshadow the fate of Afghan women. The voice of these women must be amplified in every global forum, and it is our duty to make sure that their voices have been heard. Dear friends, we are here today not only to honor the past, but to renewing our collective commitment for a future that we want to create. A future where the rights of women is non-negotiable, a future where no woman is condemned to silence and darkness because of her gender, a future where no power suppress the voice of freedom. I'm sending my greetings to WIN, to all women activists, to all those organizations who are struggling for a better world. May your path be bright and your step be firm. Thanks.
Well, that was a very profound message from our dear colleague, Latifa. Now I've got the great honor of introducing, all the way from Uganda, who traveled to New York to come to CSW 69, Annette Mukabera, who is a retired member of Parliament of Uganda, who served on committees of Works, Health, and HIV/AIDS. She's currently working as a special presidential assistant to the President of Uganda on political affairs. We are so excited to have you here with us, Annette, and without further ado.
Hi, everyone. I'm very, very pleased to be here with you. And I'm very excited to be part of this panel and to share with you my experiences, especially with WIN, and also share the experiences of my country following Beijing. 30 years, of course, is quite a long time. There are some who are not born by then, but of course, by 30 years ago, I was already a young woman in politics, one of the youngest people in politics in my country, and eventually one of the youngest politicians and members of parliament at that time. 30 years ago, close to 25 years ago, I got involved with the Women's Intercultural Network, and it was a very eye-opening experience for me, because when you look at the global local relationships and global local circles, they have helped to build the circle and the networking that has built and strengthened us and exposed us. I speak mainly from the African concept, whereby global relations have helped to enhance some of the achievements that we as a country have gained. When I look at the Women's Intercultural Network, I look at it with pleasure. Every time someone mentions WIN, I just smile. Even my own family, when they say WIN, I just smile because it brings joy to me. If it was not for the Women's Intercultural Network, way back in 2001, I would not be where I am. I'll not even be able to come to California. I'd probably even say, no, I do not want to move to the US because I'd be scared. One of the things is that I was given the strength, the inside strength to be able to move, to be able to even present myself, to even be able to defend anything that I feel right about. I can give one experience whereby I was a shy person, but when I went to Parliament, we, as a country, were moving for extension of term limits. And I stood up before my president and I said, no, what you're doing is wrong. And everyone looked at me and said, where do you get from such strength, you young girl? And I was like, there's a group of women who have empowered me, who have built me up and given me the right to say no if I believe in no. If I believe in yes, I'll say it. And the president looked at me and said, I need to talk to you. And from then, that has built the working relationship because he believes I can stand up for the truth. I can stand up for what is correct. So that's one of the achievements I thank the Women's Intercultural Network for. WIN, in one of the activities that it has done, has been able to support education. They supported education of young women who were very poor and have been able to grow and attend schools in Uganda and have gone on to achieve brilliant careers in Uganda. Some of them are not mentioning, but some of them have gone on to be leaders in their communities, local politicians, health providers, teachers, and I will keep monitoring them to see where those young girls have gone. But they're now brilliant women who can now support their families. And for that, I'll forever be grateful to the Women's Intercultural Network. From the circles that we have built with WIN, we have also been able to focus on some of the things that we have achieved as a country. Let me look at Uganda. 30 years ago, following Beijing, our country has been able to go ahead and focus on women. If you look at the leadership in our country, the Vice President of Uganda is a woman, the Prime Minister of Uganda is a woman, the Speaker of the Parliament is a woman, the ministers of the very vital ministries, that is health, education, energy, because these are very three vital things that our president focuses on, are women. Why do I look at energy? In Uganda, you find that over 60% of the women are rural and they use firewood as their source of energy. But putting a minister of energy to be a woman is to encourage her to focus and mainstream the production of cheaper sources of energy, such that the woman does not have to deforest the country and thus provide protection of the environment. Education, that is to ensure that when the minister is a woman, is to also help to streamline the education ministry such that more and more girls can go to school. There was an education program that was introduced in my country called 4 Children per Family to Study. But when the Minister of Education was a woman, she was like, all children must study, must go to school. And in the process, the focus was on girls. They would say 1 girl per family to study, but now all girls in the family must go for free education, at least primary education. And from there, they can grow to secondary education. And from there, they can even go and attend tertiary institutions, including skills development. Then health, provision of health to all structures right up to the lowest level, such that women do not have to struggle and travel long distances to access healthcare services. Leaders of the vice presidents of the leading political party is a woman. The vice president, even in the opposition, of the opposition parties are always women. I don't know why they don't make the women the leaders of their parties, but still it just shows that whether leading government or opposition government, it's still women who are in leadership, and through that they provide services for the people. One of the key international or global protocols that was signed by our country was the Maputo Convention which was signed in 2003 and I think implemented in 2005. And this was to focus on the women's human rights. This instrument was mainly focusing on reproductive health rights and also the fight against violence against women. When I talk about violence against women in Uganda, there are so many laws, including our constitution protects the right to women. Our constitution protects the rights of women to education, free healthcare, provision of security, and even when the government is signing any budgetary commitments, at least 30% of all budgetary activities are specifically assigned to women, are specifically assigned to women of age. That means women who are over 65 also have particular access to budgetary issues. So the government of Uganda is focusing mainly on women. And even when they budget the other 30%, which is for the youth, of that 30%, 50% of it is also for girls. So that means the girl child benefits from budgetary commitments, has access to education, has access to healthcare. And all these are achievements from Beijing. If it wasn't for the 30-year commitment as a result of Beijing all those years ago, then it means that Uganda would still be maybe struggling with all these kinds of budgetary lookouts on what to do for the women. But Uganda has come out outright to focus straight on women. And for this, I thank the women that gave up and went to make these commitments and really put in a voice for the women. And that's why you see that people like us, who knew I would ever be here, who knew that even with the kind of background that I come from a poor family, from a family which probably even didn't have access to good housing, but now we can be able to speak, we can be able to support others, we can be able, even the children that we give birth to, we are able to talk to them about the rights and tell them that they have the right to stay strong, they have the right to speak out for themselves, they have the right to fight for what is good for them and not be stepped on by the men. You find in Uganda today, actually the cry that is coming out is that now the girl child has taken over the male. And you can understand it. It is not a chauvinistic cry, but they have actually realized that so much attention has been put on the women and the girls that probably we are forgetting the boy child. And so there is now an effort to try and streamline that such that there are equal rights for both the boys and the girls, and that together we can build a stronger country. There's a lot to learn about Uganda. There's a lot to learn about the women of Uganda. There's even the economic development that we are doing. There's a program currently that is being run by Uganda called the Parish Development Model. And in that model, the government of Uganda directly provides funding for the women to do economic activities, small-scale economic activities, through which they can raise income for their households to be able to support themselves, support industries, and support the economic development of our country. The most I can talk about Uganda is achievements, but there are also failures. There are still challenges, because in spite of the good laws that we have, we find women are still violated, women are still abused, women's land is still taken away from them through inheritance laws. So there's a lot that still needs to be strengthened so that the woman can be able to survive, can be able to live. But we as leaders stay as strong models, supporting the women that we live with, that we work with, such that our country can be able to have a good future, and the women of Uganda can be able to live a safe life. So as I stop there, I really want to thank the Women's Intercultural Network. Never forgetting Marilyn, never forgetting the late Eileen, never forgetting Charlie, never forgetting all those wonderful women that I interacted with in those very first years, way back in 2001. I remember that time in November 2001. Because from that first step, I was able to take the second, and then the third, and then the fourth, and I'm here as a presidential assistant on political affairs. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Annette, for your insight and filling us in on what's been going on in Uganda regarding women's and girls' rights. Next, and it seems to be our last speaker, we started with a young journalist and we're ending with a young journalist, which seems to be quite appropriate. Neha Madira is actually, she serves on the board of WIN. She's an award-winning freelance journalist whose focus has been on health and policy in the MENA region in Southeast Asia. She has, as a spotlight, she worked on, she was actually the first person to report on the COVID-19, the first cases of COVID-19 in her country. And lately, she has shifted to reporting on the medical infrastructure in Gaza and the West Bank, as well as the attacks from Israel on Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen, and how those affect women, and the collapse of medical facilities available, which is something that obviously hurts women as well as children, as well as people in general. So you can read more about her in our pamphlets, in her bio. Welcome, Neha.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I wanted to say that it's been an absolute pleasure being on this panel along all of these wonderful women. It's been very heartwarming. And I also want to apologize. I look a little tired. I am in the middle of a very heavy breaking news week. But I again wanted to thank Elahijan and the rest of the WIN board for allowing me to contribute on this panel today. Like Catherine said, my name is Neha and I'm an international freelancer. To give everyone a bit of background on my reporting and how it connected me to WIN to begin with, I grew up constantly in somewhat of a culture shock. As a first generation South Asian living in the US, my family comes from a very specific part of India that was constantly dealing with state-sanctioned violence. And because of this, I learned about gender apartheid and occupation at a very young age, and I was exposed to it at the same time. Growing up in the US, I was really given the privilege to explore my identity and how it intersects with the writing that I do now, as well as the activism, especially regarding women that I have taken a part of in the past. At the same time, there have been limitations to that. I currently live in Texas, and it's a very red state where we're kind of constantly being posed with the question of whether or not women's rights need to exist in the state to begin with. Because of this, I was a breaking news reporter in Texas, like Catherine said, for a very long time, where I focused on health and policy here and abortion rights here. But after the COVID-19 global pandemic, I shifted my research to freelancing abroad because I very quickly learned that there was a gap in the way that Western media was covering these things. In terms of some of the projects that I've been able to work on that have directly coincided with my work with Elahijan and WIN, I have been able to cover the Women Life Freedom Revolution in Iran very extensively since 2022. And for the last 17 months, I have also been covering the medical collapse in Gaza. I initially connected with Elahijan while covering the revolution, and she has been an incredible mentor to me in several projects that I've worked on since. I was given the opportunity to profile her for a story on the Women's Media Center, and when I asked her about the ongoing work that she has been doing, she mentioned WIN and her connection to the Commission on the Status of Women, and she's been a part of this activism for a very long time. It was very inspiring to me, and I learned about the circles of WIN, especially those in Afghanistan and Iran. And I started interviewing women within these countries and women who she's directly worked with to kind of amplify their voices. And a few months ago, I also decided to join the WIN board to try and amplify even more voices as a journalist. I've also been able to access through WIN women outside of these circles, such as in Pakistan and Bangladesh and the Gambia. And I honestly wish I had learned about WIN even sooner, because the organization continues to do more and more for women everywhere, from providing them resources and assistance to giving them a platform that they may not have had to speak on before. In terms of this past week and being able to attend the UN Women's Conference, it was extremely inspiring to see as many voices of women around the world as possible. And I know that for many, especially living in the US and living in occupied countries, it has been extremely inspiring and it's rejuvenated a lot of hope for people, including myself. I look forward to watching this progress develop. And I, like Caden, was not alive 30 years ago during the Beijing conference, but as someone who is constantly seeing women's rights be regress and kind of go backwards and be in limbo in several places, it is a relief for me. And so I wanted to thank you everyone again for having me.
Thank you so much for your insight and letting us know about what you're doing, Neha. And I can say that I think from those who were at Beijing and those who were somewhere in between, being born but not there, young women like you give us a lot of hope as well.
Thank you so much.
At the moment, what we're going to do is open up the floor. If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, especially as we have this wonderful, panel of women together. Or have there been any questions at all in our chat? Or let's see. Sorry, I'm just scrolling down to see if there's anybody else here who's asked anything yet. Not at this moment. We don't have any questions up yet. But I actually wanted to ask Charlie. Maybe this will be a question for you, as to well, I'll ask my question, then we'll go to June Marie Justice. I just saw that she put up her hand. But what are the inroads or the or I guess my question is, what are some of the strategies from the past that you think can help us in the future, that are basically that are not restricted in time to government or whatever else, that you think that might help us move forward in these challenging times with women's rights?
I think it's really important for us to get together physically too, besides Zoom. But I think for us as earth-based people, to go out in nature. A lot of our workshops and ceremonies, like the picture behind me, we're out, through the night around a fire. I think we forget sometimes to have that element of spirituality ingrained with our lives, and it can just be in any way that suits your lifestyle or your belief system. But I think we have to stay open-hearted, and like I said before, just not being afraid to disagree. To that in that rubbing together, it kind of can bring a stronger solution. And anybody who was ever around me in Maryland knew that we were never afraid to disagree in public or in private. But I think in all the different boards I sit on now, the words of vocabulary is robust discussion. I think it's important for us to have robust discussions. That usually means people are yelling. And I've had people screaming at me in public settings where I was on the board with the name tag up with the microphone and just, really trying to diminish me. And I would just take a deep breath and agree with them. I just repeat what they said to me right back. That's actually a form of hypnotherapy. If somebody's saying something, whether you agree with it or not, you just repeat it back to them. It's a way of them having self-reflection. But also it's a way to start moving towards solution, because the person knows that you heard them. And I think in discussions, when people are yelling, they're not feeling heard. And so, like I said, a lot of times I've been in public boards, statewide boards, where, the director of the water board of state of California is screaming at me. And I just would just take a deep breath and repeat what he said back to me. I just repeated what he said, just repeated the exact words back. And somehow that creates a calmness, because the person knows they're heard. And then you go, what would this look like if it was working? I think that's an important question that doesn't always get asked, and especially in robust discussions or arguments. How is this going to look when it's working right? Because nothing can be created unless it's first imagined. We
Thank
have
you.
to get to that thing. Thank you. Thanks for the question.
June Marie Justice, would you like to unmute yourself and let us know? This is another one of our wonderful executive board members.
Hey, Catherine, thank you for the robust discussion. Really appreciate your moderating and all of our amazing contributors and panelists. I want to direct this towards Neha and Kaden. I'm just wondering if each of them could share one aha moment they've had at the CSW this year.
Do you want me to go first?
Sure, go first. Go first.
Okay. To be completely honest, I was having a lot of cognitive dissonance when I was at CSW. There is an extreme surge of protests happening not only in Texas but around the country, and being able to kind of leave the bubble that I trapped myself in with reporting and coming to New York and seeing all of these women, it was honestly a very emotional experience for me. I will say, being a part of the very first discussion that wasn't necessarily in the UN, but it was with the WIN board at the New York Bar Association. That was extremely relieving to me. I met everyone on the WIN board, as many people as I could, for the first time in person. And it was a very big deal for me because I think ever since the COVID-19 pandemic, even though there are so many very real things happening around us, sometimes it can be hard to actually make those things and these hopes and things that we talk about as solutions tangible for me. And then moving from that and watching and being on different panels throughout the couple of days that I was there, just all of it was extremely meaningful for me, especially because I haven't really experienced anything like that before. So.
Just to kind of piggyback off of what Neha was saying, I really did learn a lot in the CEDA board meeting. I learned a lot about, what it really means to collaborate with not only people your age, but just any woman of any age. And I also really learned about, what it means to really have coalition building in mind as well. And this is also something that I really wanted to bring up. I was in a panel discussion, or I wasn't a part of the panel, but I was lucky enough to sit in and listen to youth speak about, stories about other youth, and they were actually paired up with a global leader, and so that they could have a discussion. What was really meaningful that they mentioned was girls and, their image online. I think that is something that I think I'm speaking for all youth to say that we really care about our online presence and our online image and, how we are perceived. And that's kind of made really hard by not only the toxicity by males, but by other women and other girls sometimes is kind of the leading factor. And so I think creating a space where social media is used for the good and is used to promote women's rights, and, where social media is created for students and young girls to not be afraid to share, to share about themselves is really important.
Thank you, Kaden. Alahe, you're next if you would like to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. So a couple notes that I think because I was skipping time for the 8 to 10 minutes, I want to mention is that why the 5th World Conference on Women never was organized. I know a couple years after 1995, there were discussion, and I was part of that discussion with Marilyn and other WIN active members that to organize the next the 5th World Conference on Women. However, with two major global trends, the rise of right-wing politics and the rise of religious extremism globally, it was decided that we hold on to Platform for Action, that 189 countries signed it, and it's a progressive, forward-looking strategy for achieving gender equality. So the Fifth World Conference, particularly with some feminist strategists in US and Europe, and the support of the women in Global South, was never organized. However, every 5 years we had Beijing +5, Beijing +10, 15, 20, 25, and now Beijing +30. So we want to hold the governments accountable for what they signed in 1995, yet hold them accountable to report progresses that they made. So this is a strategy that even at some session in this CSW with Charlotte Bunch and other people who are really important in developing those global strategies was mentioned that it is important to have women conference, but not necessarily to produce another document. So that's one thing I thought I'll share with you, that we had some discussion at a CEDAW session that she was also participating. The other thing is, I'm sure Julianne can elaborate on that, is one of the key issues at the Beijing Women Conference was in the official session was the discussion between using the language of gender equity versus gender equality. And all human rights defenders are women's human rights defenders, including Julianne. They really made an impact by convincing governments to use gender equality. And the reason for that is that in gender equality is measurable, whereas equity, it's not measurable. So when you use gender equality, you are holding the governments accountable for certain action. And the third notes that I want to share, and hopefully we posted to Women's Intercultural Network, is that Women's Intercultural Network and a group of other organizations, including U.S. Women Caucus, that is a sister organization to us. We had a meeting with several other women organizations in United States. I think, if I'm not mistaken, late May or June of last year. And we were discussing how to prepare for United States for Beijing +30. So in the absence of any active participation, like some other countries on reporting for Beijing +30. So I suggested we produce a shadow report for United States on behalf of civil society and women organization. And I took the responsibility to write about women and poverty in US. What was the commitment of US government 30 years ago on gender and poverty, and where we are now? So it's an 8-page report that I prepared, and I would be happy to share with everyone. Hopefully we can use it in newsletter or post it to the website. Also, US Women Caucus also ask other organizations to maybe provide a brief 1 or 2 page report, like shadow report of where we are in US, that is posted to their website, US Women Caucus. I thought I'll share these points. Maybe we can keep up with it and learn more about the country that we are living, where we are after 30 years, and what are the commitments. I know we are going through a very difficult time in US, where a woman's right and the rights that women gain and previous generation fought for it are being taken away or challenged. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elahe. And Annette, I believe you had your hand up. Is there something that you would like to speak on?
While one of our colleagues was talking, they kept on raising the issue of COVID, and I wanted to point out that one of the successes about the women empowerment is that during the pandemic of COVID, and most times even during the pandemics that we go through, like when we have issues of Ebola and so forth in our country, the women have been able to come out and support their families. During COVID, we had shutdowns. We had 2 shutdowns in our country where there was no movement. And so people had to find ways of survival. People couldn't go to work. People couldn't move out of their homes. So the women localized their activities and did business and made business and raised incomes locally. And through that, they self-empowered themselves. But this was because of the enlightenment that they had received, the global information that helps to build the local communities. And so because of that relationship, women in Uganda again survived. So one of the things that we should look at is survival of the women from the empowerment that they get, and how long how do they utilize it, which was a very good thing. And I would like to relate back to the global leaders, the global fighters who have been able to help the local. When I say local, by the way, it's even within the US, because I know US was hit badly by COVID, but the women helped to preserve the families and also protect them and also rebuild them, and also globally. So the global activities that helped the local woman to be able to survive that pandemic. And those are the achievements that I would want us to celebrate. That's what I wanted to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annette. I think that's really important in remembering how women can really bond together and and resolve very difficult issues in a way that often men are not programmed to think. That's, I think, one of the things too, is celebrating the difference between men and women and what we can each bring in our sphere to make our local lives better, as well as those for everyone else. I think goodness and equity can be contagious. That's what I'd like to see. Let's hope it's as contagious as COVID. That's my wish. We're now getting near to the end of our program. Is there? Oh, Charlie, we will end with you, Charlie.
Okay. I just wanted to mention, when people talk about the United States, they forget about the Native Americans. We are 0.01% of the population. So when people say things have never been this bad, that's not true. It was very bad when the Europeans invaded here in 1492 and began the worst genocide in the history of this earth. That we went from a fully populated land. California was fully populated with people living in permanent villages. Every square inch of California was touched and managed and caretaken by human beings. The climate change disasters are seen because of the industrial age. And we have to remember the people that are minorities in their own place of origin. We're the only true minority in the United States. And when people say the United States has never blah, blah, I'm like, oh, no. Things got very, very bad in the 1400s. In 1700s is when the Europeans invaded California. New Mexico, desert environment like Afghanistan. It wasn't as devastated, but California, the population was that had been here for more than 10,000 years, was nearly wiped out in 25 years of contact. Now that is a genocide, and when we talk about the United States, we have to mention that. This is not the worst that it's been, I can tell you. 35 generations on this soil, I know. And what I'm talking about happened to my grandparents. It wasn't ancient history. It was my grandparents. I have a lot of my living mentors. They were here during the invasions and the genocides that occurred here. So let's just keep that on the table when we're talking about the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie, for that input. Elahe, as the president of WIN, would you like to say any last words before we wrap up?
Well, I just want to say thank you truly from the bottom of my heart for all of you to be here, for the WIN board contributing throughout more than the 3 decades to keep us moving forward, and to you, Catherine, for moderating this session, for being our representative in New York and keeping your eyes open for all the opportunities that will make WIN keeping forward for another 30 years or more. So thank you all for being here, and I appreciate your presentation. And one last note is I'm so proud of Kaden and Neha. WIN always was, for us, it was always important to have young women at the table, because the future belongs to you, and we are very glad that you are part of WIN family. Thank you.
Well, with that, I am going to say goodbye and wrap this up. But it has been wonderful to have you all here.